Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. We got a little 5-game slate here for you on this Thursday night in the NBA. In this one, we are taking a look at the marquee matchup of tonight for sure. The Bucks headed to Brooklyn, taking on those Nets, who do get to have Kyrie Irving at home, as we all know. Make sure you check out Nate's great article up on playpicks.com, as well as some best bets and player props in there for you. And like and subscribe to that page, as we got a couple other videos up for you today, including that player props one we love to bring you each and every weekday. And head to thelines.com as well. Make sure you're checking out who's in and out of those lineups all the way up until game time, as well as the best odds available for you out there from odds makers that we have listed for you there with our odds checker. And as always, if you do still need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, head to ftpicks.com or dkpicks.com and find those listings in your area, such as what we've got for tonight. Nate, let's get into it.
Yeah, and that's -1.5 at home here. They have a bit of a scheduling advantage here with the Bucks coming off that hard-fought win in Philly. Bucks also host the Clippers tomorrow night. Nets get a day off before going to Atlanta, and then they have a few days off before facing the sorry Rockets. So a little rest advantage for Brooklyn. This should be a game that both teams sell out to try to win, though, given how close the Eastern Conference is in every way. We're quickly looking at the other 4 games on the slate. The Sixers are -10 at Detroit, which has been a cover machine lately. Beware taken against those Pistons. The other game we break down, Cavs are +6 at Atlanta. That totals up 7 points to 227, but still like the over at that continued spot. As long as it's below 230, I think we like it. Clippers are +2.5 at the Bulls. They just got Paul George back and beat the Jazz, which is -13 at home against the Lakers, still without LeBron and AD and clinging to that last spot in the play-in. Look, my overall take here is it's playoff time in the East. There's nothing separating the top 4 teams. Brooklyn is obviously running out of time to get right and get into their playoff form, now playing their 3rd game with Kyrie as a full-time player. So what we saw last night with the Heat and Celtics is the pace really slowing down the stretch. And that game's kind of surprisingly going under after the teams were close to 200 early in the 4th quarter, almost no points down the stretch. And I'm looking at how each of these teams play in the clutch, and it is much, much slower. Brooklyn's been pretty bad in the clutch because they still haven't had their full team lately. But their pace slows down to 98 when they're at home in clutch situations, the final 5 minutes of games within 5, versus 107 on the road. On the season at home, they have a pretty bad 104 offensive rating in the clutch and a 106 defensive rating. So they're winning with their defense at times. They're actually 21st in 4th quarter scoring and playing at a relatively slow pace in those games. So down the stretch, Milwaukee scores in every situation. But, yeah, Brooklyn is 19th in pace in the 4th quarter. And, they've gone under 17 of their 28 when listed as home favorites. Lately, what Brooklyn's been doing defensively has been a little more impressive in terms of limiting 2-pointers. They're 7th in regular field goal defense in their last 5. Still 3rd worst 3-point defense, but Milwaukee is sputtering a little bit from deep. Typically, they score a high percentage of their points from 3. They're only getting 33% of those from deep. It's been more of Giannis getting his way down low. They've gone under in 3 of their last 5 with a 98 pace. And prior to Kyrie going off in Milwaukee for that surprise win, these teams had played, playoff caliber knockdown drag out games. Yep. You can include the 7-game playoff series, of course, where the Nets only had Durant, but the previous 4 meetings between these teams averaged 220 and only one went over. It went over a total of 215. So for this game total to be bet up from 238 to 243 is a little bit of people just reading into results when these teams face bad teams and they just blow up. You look at what Milwaukee's done since they had that blowout loss to Denver at the end of January. They've won 11 of 14, excellent offensive rating, but they're just 7-7 straight up against teams above 500 in that span. And they've gone under in 6 of their last 9 against playoff teams. And so that is what I'm looking at here, under all the way. I don't really have another bet I like because I think it is basically a playoff game at this point, and it could go either way.
Totally. It's a complete pick'em. It's the most 50-50 pick'em game I could think of this season, where I'm just going, I literally don't even lean one way. I mean, the other night against Philly, we were telling you, man, we like Milwaukee. There's some weird stats for Milwaukee, when they're an underdog on the road having really bad numbers. But we mentioned in that video, the only time they're an underdog on the road this season, most of the time, is when they don't have 1 or 2 of their big 3, and they're playing a juggernaut like the Nets. And they have all their guys tonight. This line is set correctly because the Nets are back to being a juggernaut. But I think the points are way off. To your point, I feel just as strongly about taking this under at 243 as I do about not placing a single dime on any other bet in this game, because even the point guard matchup, Kyrie came back. That game was a bit of an anomaly. It was the return of Kyrie coming into a game that they needed, and everybody sort of just playing out the Nets at that point and saying, well, until Kyrie can play home games, we don't care about this team. And they were still reeling. The trade had just happened, and we didn't know what they were going to get from their other players, and their other players being Seth Curry and Drummond came up big in that win. And it was sort of that, first time that the troops were rallying together for Milwaukee coming in, and they were just really unstoppable on offense. Well, in their last 4, as you mentioned, they went over in that Pistons game, even though the Pistons covered, as we said that they would. But other than that, we're talking about under against a Hornets team and the Heat, and then under against the Jazz, over against the Grizz, which was unsurprising, and a really great game on a Saturday night from Memphis. That is somewhat of an anomaly as well, with that second unit just crushing the Bucks in that game, shooting lights out from 3. I just don't think that'll quite be the case. Yes, Milwaukee's defense has not been good enough or very good in general as of late, but I think there's too much. It's just too many points, man. 243 is ridiculous. I understand they hit 249 in the last game. I just told you a million different reasons why, and haven't even told you that Brook Lopez didn't play in that game, and that since he's been back, as you mentioned, in a few different instances so far in the last 3 or 4 games that he's been back, that defensive rating went right back down to right around where it was last season as well, back to about 111, 112, which is what you're looking for. Obviously, as we mentioned, when Brook Lopez is in there, that changes the dynamic of everything. He's got to be a top 5 defensive center in the league at this point, with the ability to shut guys down. So that improves their defense tremendously. And then the last thing, as you mentioned as well, I mean, Milwaukee plays with pace and the same way that they always play throughout the game. But the Nets, rather, are a team that clearly prefers to play in that first half with a ton of pace. Bless you. They score a ton of points in the first half, and then just regress on defense because they just sort of go back into there's not really much of a flow to their offense. It's a lot more stand around and watch Kyrie and KD hit. And if they don't just keep going down at that same pace, which we know they don't, then that offense is really going to start to be stifled down the stretch. So yeah, I would consider, even if you see a 120 total at the end of the first half, 130 total at the end of the first half, and this you see a live total there somewhere around like 250 or so, go ahead and hit the under there. You can feel really confident about that. In the second half, this game's going to slow down, and you're not going to get up to 245, 250 at that point.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that is the other bet that we would consider, is the first half over and then a live bet under, because looking at even more of these stats down the stretch, I mean, Brooklyn's getting 62 points per game in the first half. Their last 3 on the season, they're actually the 6th lowest scoring team in the second half at home, 52 points. They actually have the 2nd worst offensive rating at home on the entire season in the fourth quarter. So, wow. I mean, because they haven't had Kyrie, I guess, and he's only played now 2 games at home and has struggled to shoot with his shooting, partially because of the pressure he put on himself. But I don't see that trend bucking completely against a Bucks team that can defend for sure. And their pace also slows down in the clutch when they're on the road a lot more versus at home. Yeah, you mentioned Brook Lopez. He doesn't put up great individual numbers, but just his presence out there, his ability to play drop D has helped them drop to a 112 defensive rating in their last 4. They went under in 3 straight before that total of 234 in Philly. They're allowing 111 in those 4 games versus like 123 prior to that. They're actually allowing the fewest free throw attempts in March and even fewer in those last 4. And their 3-point defense has improved a lot. Brooklyn also scores the lowest percentage of points off threes at home, and Milwaukee's a team that gives up the 3rd fewest paint points, dares you to beat them from outside. So as long as they can stay attached to Seth Curry, there's not really a lot of other nets that are going to burn them from deep. I think there's just a lot of ways that they can do a pretty good job defending each other down the stretch. And when you have 1A, 1B, Durant, Giannis going head to head, they're some of the few guys that can actually stop each other down the stretch. Everybody's betting this as if there's nobody who can stop those guys, because that's usually how it goes. But when they play each other, we saw in the last 4 meetings, it goes under.
Yep, 100%. 4 of the last 5 going under as well. This is wild. I mean, you're talking about it's crazy that Brooklyn is so bad in the fourth quarter on the season. I mean, especially at home, but even just in general at home on the season with the 6th worst offensive rating in the fourth quarter. KD's still been playing in those games. This is the craziest part about what I just said, though. Kyrie Irving leads the league in 20 games this season that he's played in points per game in the fourth quarter, and KD is 8th in points per game in the fourth quarter. Yet somehow this team is still the 6th worst offense in the fourth quarter efficiency wise. And it's because of what we told you. It's just stand around and watch these two guys go. They're both scoring that many points. But you look at their percentages in the fourth quarter, Kyrie shooting 46% from the field, 31% from 3, KD shooting 45% from the field, 27% from 3 for KD in the fourth quarter, barely making half a 3 on 1.5 attempts in that quarter. Wild times to look at that when you consider how bad the team is there. And then we know Milwaukee will continue to play well offensively no matter what time of the game it is, but they'll also continue to play poorly defensively. Still, 243 too many. That's an easy one, and definitely some fun. We're all going to be watching this game, so you might as well consider those live bets as well if you're going to be spending the time to watch this one and to hit that under at halftime, pretty much no matter what at this point. So that is all the time we have for you in this one. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page, and check out those other couple videos we have for you tonight on this 5-game slate. And until we see you next, happy betting.